minutes. There we go. Okay. Yes, right. My daughter here on the right is assisting me with letting everybody in, since we have such a beautiful and big crowd today. But welcome. Let me start welcoming you, Michael, to the circle. Well, we are so happy that you're calling to call Deborah, just to make sure. Yeah, it would be beautiful if she would attend, and I'm sure she will. But Michael, thank you for being here today, and thank you all for being. Michael is my guest speaker in the circle. He's a seasoned leader for many years, about 40 years in the communication industry. But Michael's also a trauma survivor, and he has experienced multiple forms of trauma in his childhood. And yeah, he actively engaged in the process of dealing with this and reclaiming his life. And EMDR was an amazing and very important part of that. And what I love so much about Michael, I had the privilege to talk to him 2 times before already, that he is tell such a beautiful story, as in how he healed, how EMDR worked for him, but also that he wants to help others who are struggling in life, to make this work accessible, his work, but also the EMDR work, right? And I think the process made him ready, what I read about it, to write this absolute wonderful book. Talked about it a lot already. Can you see it? Every memory deserves respect. He wrote this book together with Deborah Korn. We're still waiting for Deborah. She was in our circle in December. To make it also accessible, in this case, for other leaders or health experts or coaches to learn more about EMDR. So Michael, it's a great honor and a great joy to have you here today. You're on mute still. You're still on mute, Michael? Yes,
Sorry.
there
Thank you for having me. And I apologize ahead of time. I was at a conference all last week and had a little bit of a head cold, which I never get. But it's just an honor and a pleasure to be here and to be able to share with all of you, and hopefully create some clarity where there might be a vacuum, and maybe give you also something to share with others.
Right. Wonderful. Love that. Before we start with your story, I was going to welcome also Deborah Korn. I suppose she will come a little bit later, but Deborah Korn, when she's here, she's a very well-known and leading American trauma therapist on EMDR. She's also a teacher, researcher, and she was awarded with the French Shapiro Award for her EMDR work. I hope we can welcome her later. But I also want to welcome you as an audience, because today we have a pretty amazing audience. To me, it feels like sort of a full circle. We have family members in the room, we have leaders in the room, business partners, therapists, and coaches. Wow. So I would like to take just a few minutes, also for Michael, so he knows his context today, to give you a little introduction. And if you like, feel free just to raise your hand if I mention your name, because one part of the circle as well is to connect together, right, outside of this circle. It might be that there's somebody in here today that is interesting for you as well. So I give a little introductions of you all, of your role and the country where you're coming from, and you can leave if you like some of your contact details in the chat later on. Okay, so we are very blessed today with 4 trauma therapists or psychologists based on EMDR, humanistic psychology, couple and executive psychology as well. We're waiting for Debbie, but we have Carrie Powers. I can see you now, Carrie, so I will open up my window. There's Carrie. We have Carrie Powers from the United States. Very happy to see you. She is actually a teacher in the program I'm following about somatic EMDR. So wonderful that you're here, Carrie. We have Annelie Drieser from Canada. Good morning, Annelie. That's very early, Annelie. And also we have Dorte, humanistic psychologist, originally from Denmark, living in the Netherlands, right? We have some amazing coaches as well, based on impact coaches, life coaches, grief coaches, yoga teachers. We have Fiona from Bonn, Germany. Brechtje de Vette is there, our life coach. Ineke Bueno, business coach as well. And Debbie Winterberg, who specialized in grief coaching. We have some business leaders and HR partners. 2 HR partners actually today. Eline van Nauwhuis and Carine Wilderop. So you're sort of colleagues together. And business leader Geert-Jan Aaldering. Yes, there you are. Okay. And we're still waiting for some business founders. But I see George is here with an absolutely amazing company I saw today, helping humanity with the sun. And Corné Termata is here. Hi, Corné, welcome again. You came before. We're waiting for Pavi Mehta. She's a filmmaker and also an author of the book Infinite Vision. I think I mentioned everybody, correct? Yes. Okay. And what I think is great that we have, well, we're waiting for the sister of Eileen still, but we have a family energy room, but also we have leaders, business partners, and coaches. And that's what we really want, right? To bring health professionals together with leadership. So somebody just came in. That was Marije. Marije, welcome. I think you are here now. I can't see everybody because we have too much screens now, but Marije, welcome. And let me see. Well, for the people that don't know me, my name is Barbara van Lodestein. I'm a business psychologist. And actually, my goal is to work on healed leadership. We need healed leadership in the world, right? And I work with leaders all around the world, aligning healing from the inside with business strategies in their businesses, to be really short. And the circle I founded in 2023, it's actually 3 years ago this month. And we, I give stage to beautiful and amazing people to share their story. And our goal is to compassionately share, reflect, and listen to each other. That's what we do. And hopefully we have a ripple effect outside of the circle. So I encourage you, and I talked about this with Michael too, feel welcomed and free in this environment to raise your hand if you have a question or you want to reflect on something or whatever. Also, Michael, if you want to introduce the audience, feel free. It's entering a dialogue together, right? So that's the idea of this circle. Well, Michael, let me pass on the talking stick to you then, and you can share your story with us. There you go.
Okay, Barb, would you like to go through the questions as we outlined them? How would you like to do this?
Whatever feels comfortable for you.
I think that probably would work well.
Oh, wonderful. That's great. Yes.
So shall I give you just a little bit about my background?
Yes, you can just start.
Okay, first of all, it's amazing to get all these people, anybody today has any time on their hands, they're not already in a Zoom call. It's remarkable. So I'm honored that you all are taking time out of your days to be in this call. My very brief nonlinear background is, I think I do it pretty quickly. I grew up in Northern California. I went to college in Wisconsin. I was a chemistry major and wanted to be a pre-med. I was a pre-med student, got into medical school, then didn't go. And so I did the next logical thing, which is go into advertising for 40 plus years, which makes no sense, but that's what I did. And that career was pretty much every technology account there was to run globally. I had the opportunity to run, with one exception, which is Microsoft. And then I exited that after I was running the IBM business at an agency called Ogilvy and Mather in New York. And I figured I checked all those boxes. So then I did another completely illogical thing, which is to go to study as an actor in New York for 3.5 years, which is the most terrifying and exhilarating thing I've ever done. And I did that for 3.5 years. And after that, I worked actually had a brief stint at the Apple Store, which I loved, for $15 an hour as a presenter. And then I worked for a London-based executive development firm and then started my own in 2011. So I focus on 2 things now, communications coaching and on branding. And so last week, for example, I was working with 9 speakers and a CEO for their annual sales kickoff meeting. So that's what I do. As I say, it's kind of a nonlinear, crazy path, but I like to think that from a professional standpoint, it all adds up to allow me to do what I do now. So with that, I can just turn the questions over to Barbara.
I already unmuted myself. Yeah, I think, Michael, what we did up front, we had sort of a storyline also to help prepare you, in how you would unfold your story, because what you have done in your career has much to do with how you survived as a trauma survivor, right? Or how you had your coping strategies. So we made sort of a little narrative, and we thought about maybe starting with the end, actually, the trigger that set everything in motion for you, starting in the air. And then if you want, I can help you with the storyline, or maybe you just fall into it. But it's still always interesting to go back, to the youth, to your history in what happened, and see how you evolved later on in life. So maybe we start with the trigger. Imagine that is what you say. Imagine that. So go ahead.
So actually, Barbara, I think the way the book works, it's my story that's intermittently narrated by Debbie's professional clinical perspective. So I think the way you've done this outline would work well for this podcast as well. So you can feel free to reintroduce yourself for the next question as we move along this narrative. Okay. Excuse me. So because you don't know me, my coping strategy was basically all about accomplishment, status. I became a status and achievement junkie. I had been in advertising for a while, and in the advertising world, there's, at least in my point of view, the sort of Mount Olympus of advertising was an agency called Ogilvy and Mather. And I wanted to work at that agency for 16 years before I actually got there. And it was twice a year, I would check in with the HR person, and it got to be kind of a joke, but I knew that's what I wanted because I was so myopically focused on getting to where I felt the top of the industry was. And when I finally got there, I was there for 7 years. I joined as the worldwide account director on IBM. And if you don't know this at the time, it was the biggest account consolidation in the advertising business in the history of advertising. So it was over $1 billion. And I was a worldwide account director. So I had, arguably the biggest job in the advertising business, which served my need to compensate for what was lurking beneath. And when I got laid off, which is different than being fired, but when I made a transition off of IBM onto another account and the other account didn't materialize, everything fell apart. It was like I was living in this house of cards that was so fragile because it wasn't built on anything in my actual core. It was all based on a facade, and everything collapsed. And at that time, all this trauma that I'd been avoiding and suppressing and trying to numb came crashing in on me. And it's kind of a farce what happened, because I made a series of really bad financial decisions. I sold my apartment. I made some really bad moves. I was going through money at an incredibly rapid pace, not giving any thought to my future. And my anxiety and my fear just got worse and worse and worse. And, in New York, I don't know how it is where you all live, but in New York, unfortunately, like in the winter, a lot of times homeless people, aggregate or hang out at, outside of stores, and to get into the store, you have to walk around them, or I hate to say this, but walk over them. And I was imagining myself ending up as one of those homeless people in the snow on the sidewalk, penniless. And at this time, I was starting to realize that the bad things that were going on in my adult life probably originated somewhere else, but I never really made a connection between the trauma of my past or childhood and the aberrations or the bad things that were going on in my adult life. And I came to find out, and this was at 65 years old, that I had survived pretty severe neglect, physical abuse, and sexual abuse in my childhood. And again, never made a connection between what was going on in my adult life and that original trauma. And the weird thing is, I wouldn't say that I was ambitious. I would say that I was compelled. So everything I was doing in this myopic obsession with status and achievement was meant to mitigate against a core belief that I was worthless, I was no good, I was unlovable. And, that's just an untenable position to have to live with as a child. So this started at a very early age, and just focusing on all, symbols and objects and status. And then it just kind of came to real fruition once I entered the advertising world, which you could argue is kind of a status world anyway. And so for me, I had been on this trajectory, which led me to the very top of the advertising industry, running the largest piece of business in the advertising world, which is IBM. And when the wheels came off, when I was laid off at Ogilvy, I felt like I was just in a race to the bottom. I couldn't, it was like I was in neutral. I couldn't put myself back in gear. I was just sort of falling and getting more and more greater levels of anxiety on a daily basis, and started abusing alcohol. And then I discovered the incredible diabolical combination of alcohol and Vicodin. I was blacking out on a regular basis. I can't tell you how many times I would come home late at night, and I have no idea the next day how I got home. I had lost another cell phone. I left it in a cab or something. And so it got really pretty bad. And the weird thing was, I couldn't seem to get in gear. And the strange thing for me about that was I had been so compelled for decades. It was all very systematic and pragmatic. And I ran the Apple account, and then I ran the digital business account, and then I ran the compact business, and then I, one after the other, finally getting, climbing the mountain to IBM and to Ogilvy, and then it just completely fell apart.
Yeah, yeah. And like you said, you could not be compelled anymore, right? You were so controlled in your life, and this was quite the opposite, being in a free fall, so to speak.
Yep.
Which must have been, like you write about it in the book, very, very scary also to experience, right?
Yeah.
To help our people to understand together, can you share a bit more about your youth, the context of your family, the relationship with your brother as well, which is an important part of your story, and your mother, but maybe the family context where you're coming from?
Yeah, it's funny, when I was listening to all of you being introduced, you're all sort of in wellness and therapy and helping people. I often talk about, I think, again, I'm not a clinician, that I think, we're born with factory settings. We're kind of normal, joyful, at birth, we're kind of, and then it immediately starts, you get dropped into whatever crucible is your family. And then if it's not an ideal situation, the problems start. So in my case, the pathology of my family, I had two very, at the outside, very attractive, very well-to-do families. My mother went to a place called Sarah Lawrence for prep school, and then for Dobbs Ferry Prep School and Sarah Lawrence College. My father went to Deerfield Academy, and then he went to Yale. Very attractive. And it turns out that they were two very severe narcissists. And they got married and they had 5 children. The birth order was my older brother, my older sister, a miscarriage, myself, and my younger sister. So there are 5, but only 4 living because of miscarriage, which happened before me. And as I learned to understand later in life what I was dealing with and mitigating and hiding and burying all those years was severe neglect, sexual, physical, emotional abuse. And I guess in my case, because neglect, I think, is usually referred to as complex trauma because it happens over time. I had no attachment to either one of my caregivers, meaning my parents, because I don't think they were capable of it. In our family, it was sort of an equal opportunity problem because all 4 of us, my 3 siblings and myself, all have dealt with the neglect issue, although I think for whatever reason, it may have been worse for me. And really not being able to form that fundamental attachment as, which starts at infancy. I know I've watched the still face video where the mother is reacting to the infant and then she turns away and she comes back with just a still face. And within, 2 minutes, the child is completely unhinged and crying and then goes into a kind of a collapse. So I also had to deal with, in our family, an older brother who was a really severe bully to me. And anyone who's been bullied knows that it's a terrible, terrible thing because you never feel like you're safe. You never feel like you could be in a place where you're not going to be surprised and so he's going to, come out and get you or, grab you by the hair or beat you up. And, I'd have many, many situations where my 2 sisters were on top of him trying to pull him off of me and he's on top of me and, beating me up. And the unfortunate thing in my case was I was in another school. I had to travel on 4 buses to get there on a daily basis. And I had a bully starting in 3rd grade. So 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, I had a pretty serious bully who was the class bully, but for some reason, most cases he would single me out. So I would be, standing in the lunch line in 3rd grade and he'd come up, smiling and he just sort of slugged me in the stomach and I'd have the wind knocked out of me. I'd pass out and wake up with, looking at a circle of faces above me, having been knocked out. So that was a pretty difficult thing to deal with. And it started very young, but I would say that that it was a situation where I had to figure out some way to survive because feeling like I wasn't attached to either one of my parents. I had my brother was, just as bad, if not worse, because he was a terrible bully. I had no one really to turn to. The people who were supposed to be supporting me weren't around, weren't doing anything to help me. So I had to figure out, I guess, pretty early on how to survive. And the survival was to just bury everything and develop defenses and protective structures that were going to allow me to exist, because otherwise it would be hopeless. It would be fatal.
Exactly. And it's interesting what you tell, because later in your book you describe like you had been living under the surface or under the what these defenses kept you up, right? Or kept you sort of safe since there was so many neglect and disconnection, the attachment, no safe place, no soothing place to grow up. So very early in life you used your defenses, not knowing, unconsciously, because even later in life you did not make the connection with your early childhood trauma, although you describe a very insecure and painful situation. So can you help us understand how that works with these defenses? What did you build, for example? And also, how did they inhibit you unconsciously, I suppose, resulting in that you, and I think many leaders as well, what I've seen in my practice, unconsciously living under the surface, right? You won't even recognize your own defenses. Can you share some more of your defenses with us?
Sure. And I think to understand my situation at the time, at whatever age, and I have a feeling it's very, very early, maybe even in a pre-verbal stage, I was, the inference that I drew at whatever age was, I am no good because I'm getting no attention. I am worthless because no one's paying attention to me. I am unlovable. These are the only deductions I could come to at a child, particularly a nonverbal child, because I think it's sort of a binary world. You're being cared for or you're not. And the deduction, if you're not, is, I guess, I'm no good, I'm worthless, I'm unlovable.
Right.
Whatever the case, that was the conviction that I lived with. And so in order to survive, I pretty much, I think most of my childhood and thereafter was living in a severely dissociated world. I remember growing up, any distraction, I was also, as a young boy, little kid, I think I was so dissociated. It was the reason why I would always falling. I was always tripping and falling, and I would get concussions on my forehead. And I had probably at least 6 of them. I remember one time I fell down the stairs and landed on the radiator, and I had a huge concussion. And in an example of my parents' solution was to tape a big piece of industrial carpeting on my forehead. And I have several pictures, I hate to say it, of me with other little kids. I'm maybe 3. And here I am looking like a freak with this taped on piece of industrial carpeting. And even at that age, I'm sure I felt like a complete freak or like a special needs kid. This was their idea, their complete inattuned idea of how to solve the problem. I think it was because I was so dissociated. I was unsteady in my body, falling down all the time because I was dissociating all the time. And that went on. I mean, I remember going from in 3rd grade, I'd have to take 4 buses to school by myself. I'm 8 years old. I remember getting on the main bus from San Francisco to Piedmont, California, and I would always buy a copy of my favorite comic book. What was it? Richie Rich. That was my favorite, and I would just dissociate into this comic book of money and safety and security and cars and butlers and in Richie Rich, it was such a childlike representation of wealth and money, but that was my go-to place to dissociate as a kid. And then then it sort of morphed as I got older. Like when I remember being in high school, as it started, the achievement and status started really, weighing in. I had every color of the Lacoste shirt that was made. I would even get them through friends from France, so I had every single color. My first car when I graduated from high school was I found a used Mercedes-Benz. My first car in college was a BMW. I mean, no one had a BMW. I remember in college when I got my American Express Gold Card, it was as if how can I even say it? Like the Ark of the Covenant had landed in my mailbox, and there was my American Express Gold Card. Like, oh my God, this obsession. Getting into medical school, that was the status box to check. But then I didn't go. Running the Boston Marathon, but I had to run it and not walking a single step. That was a box I could check. In 1994, when no one even knew what the internet was, getting my surname Baldwin registered as a domain name, that was a box to check because no one even knew the internet was even out there. And finally in my professional career, arriving at, as I said before, the Mount Olympus of advertising, Ogilvy and Mather in the New York office, running the IBM business, 500 people reporting to me, flying on the Concorde on a regular basis. I thought, I thought this is, I've done it. I had my apartment, and I was, basically running the world, traveling all the time, and this totally dissociated state because I was, miles and miles away from this buried trauma. So in terms of the price that I paid for that, I had no real connections in my life. I had no real relationships in my life. I had no intimacy that was anything authentic in my life. If any of you met me during that period, you would say, yeah, Michael, I have no idea who he is. I have no sense whatsoever of what the authentic person is there. I was all about appearances, all about this facade that I had created. And as I said earlier, when the primary mitigator of this house of cards that I had built around status and achievement, when that collapsed, it was just a downward spiral. Yeah. And that's when the alcohol abuse started getting really, really bad. That's when unfortunately, someone introduced me to Vicodin, and introducing this, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven with alcohol and Vicodin. Oh my God, can it get any better than this? This is great. And then again, waking up, having no idea how I got home. And that would happen on a regular basis. And, before that, it wasn't necessary because I was working 24/7. I mean, and this started my very first job in advertising. I would go into the office on Saturday and Sunday because I would just be so obsessed about work, so obsessed, and getting ahead and advancing and so on and so forth. And these examples I'm giving you are a grain of sand on a beach of obsessive, compulsive status and achievement that's just beyond belief. The ritualization, right, almost fetishizing these aspects of success and achievement. That's sort of how bad it got.
Right. And maybe if I listen to you, and of course I know your story, but the security is symbol for status, right? Status is the most important thing. So they need each other to feel secure, and it became very intense. Could you also experience, while you were so intense in achieving more and more and more, most likely you need more and more every time you achieve something. Could you feel or maybe experience the inhibition, I suppose, of the lack of intimacy or having a partner or feeling authentic or at home? Did you even experience that or not?
I sort of feel bad saying this because I wish it wasn't the case. I think the answer is no, because I so successfully filled all the pores with this obsession of goal set, goal achieve, goal set, goal achieve, goal set, goal achieve, 24/7. And my family, it was a joke in my family. If Michael says he's coming home for Christmas, we'll believe it when he walks in the door, because otherwise, we'll never see him because he just work is everything. So I think the answer is no. And the sad part about that answer is that I didn't even realize that real life was nothing about what I was doing. This was pure compensatory, mitigating behavior to try to keep me as far away from the buried trauma as possible.
Right. And you didn't even realize it.
No.
That's an important thing to say, like many don't even realize in how they are suppressing with this coping behavior, pain in early childhood, like you described. You didn't realize it. Were there things in your life back then that were also inhibiting you, that were maybe surprising you? Were you surprising yourself like, hey, this is difficult for me, I can't do that? Or like you were surprised after you lost a job? Were you also in that journey surprised by things, or did you
actually I should tell you that there were two clues, and I didn't know how to recognize them as such. That one was since I was a boy, and that was I could never go into a boy's room and use the stall and be able to actually pull my pants down and sit down on a toilet and use the stall. Absolutely impossible. No, there's no way on earth I could ever do that. I remember being in second grade, waiting till the big hand hit 12 so I could leave and run home to use the bathroom. Because now I had no idea what that was all about. I just thought this was just the way I was. I had no idea this was a phobia that had roots somewhere. I just thought it was the way I was. Later in life, post puberty, any scenario that would involve an intimate situation with a woman was sheer and total panic. I mean, completely panic inducing. I mean, at one point, there was a situation where I had invited a woman I was going out with, and she was upstairs, and we'd gone to bed, and we were just going out for early stages, and I remember telling her, you have your own bedroom upstairs, you're safe up here. And about 10 minutes later, she came down into my room in her nightgown, and I just blacked out. I couldn't even tell you what happened. I just blacked out. Again, thought, I guess this is just the way I am. I guess this is just me, having no idea this is a phobia that has roots somewhere, but I didn't know what it was.
Right. These were two clues for you: the intimate relationship with your own body, I suppose, not using public bedrooms, as well as not having intimate relationships with a spouse or a woman that was freaking you out. There were two clues.
Yep.
But in a way, you managed them, you ignored them, you moved on, right?
Yep.
Right.
I thought this is just how I am.
This is how you are.
Yeah.
And you described, well, maybe before we move on, because I know you gave us a lot of information now as well from your childhood, your relationship with your brother, which was on top of everything very harsh for you to experience that. You start working, you gain the status that you long for by Richie Rich. I don't know that, but so young you had your role model there.
Yeah.
When you lost your job, you told us what happened with the alcohol abuse and all, but also you started really intense taking care of your mother at that point. I remember that reading that in the book, like having something to hold on, which ended up in the point that you thought, now I really need help. So I want to move along, right, from that part. Maybe you can share a little bit in what happened in a relationship with your mother, and meanwhile with your brother, when things were starting to fall down, before we cut into the EMDR journey.
So,
and then I'm also open maybe up the space a little bit for the people that are present here, if you have a question or a reflection. But maybe start first with the story of your mother when things were falling down. That was your response, right?
Yeah. So if you can imagine a childhood that was basically, not knowing it at the time, one extended period of extreme longing for my mother's love and attention and affection. Extreme. Not aware of it, buried. And towards the end, when things got really bad as an adult, I was getting really involved with my mother. She lived in Colorado, I was in New York, doing things for her, flying out there and setting up, a new television for her, organizing her her Netflix movie lists, setting up, doing FaceTime with her. And what I realized now, what I was trying to do was, it's sort of a last minute Hail Mary, desperate attempt to see if I could get her to finally pay attention to me. And the unfortunate crescendo of this was she came to New York. She came to New York one last time before I started EMDR, and I did everything possible for her. Tickets to the best shows. She loved Broadway, the best restaurants, limousines taking her everywhere. Took care of everything, like beyond anything you can imagine. I mean, I just went all out. And I remember walking to her hotel the day she was leaving, and I'm thinking as I'm walking down the hallway to where the restaurant was, the hotel, thinking, she's never asked me one question about myself the entire time she's been here. And then I sat down at the breakfast table with her, and the first thing she said was, you haven't said a thing about my new blouse. And I thought, okay, subconsciously, I think that was it. You could hear, you could hear the bombs going off in my mind. That night, I got blackout drunk, have no idea how it happened. Once again, fell on my forehead. Don't know where it was, don't know how it happened. Came home, blood all down my, 3 a.m. I saw my primary care doctor in the morning. He said, I can't touch this. And I had to go to a special person to sew it up, 7 stitches. And I remember seeing the therapist I was seeing at the time, a talk therapist. She said, Michael, I can't help but notice this is the same place where you've had every other concussion in your life. And I thought, this is so sad. And I remember going to the New York Times, which is one of my clients, the next day, and having wear a hat so they couldn't see the bandage over my forehead, which, of course, when I was a kid, was just out for everyone to see. So I think it was a case of protracted neglect or willful neglect, and then at the end, desperation to try to do anything and everything. And at one point, the breaking point was my younger sister said, Michael, you are way too involved with a mother's life. This is not normal. And that was kind of the breaking point.
Right. And that's what you shared. And thank you again for sharing so openly with us and so vulnerably from your point of view, understanding what you have been through. And when you lost your job, you did actually the same sort of coping strategy with your mother as you had been doing before, not relating to what's going on, right? You were going out and about for your mother. You did everything just like you did with your job, and you fell again on this spot. So it seems like the cycle that you are describing went on for a very long time. And I know that something amazing happened when your path started on EMDR. Let's maybe give a moment to the people in the circle here, if there is any questions or reflection before we move along. Is that okay with you, Michael?
Yeah. Hi, Debbie.
Is Debbie there? I haven't seen her yet.
You're muted. You want to introduce Debbie?
Yeah, I don't see her yet because I have so many. You see her. Let me see, Debbie.
Yeah, you're muted.
Okay.
She's trying.
She's trying. Let me unpin you for a moment so we can see. There's Debbie. Yes, Debbie, you know how to do it. Let me help you. If you click on your picture, you see three dots on the right, and you can do pin to. You can. Oh no, sorry. I'm talking about unpinning. Below, below your screen, you will see a mic on the left. You don't see the mic. Oh, you do see the mic. And you can click on the mic. You're clicking and nothing is happening, Debbie. I can't believe it.
That's weird.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah. Could Bob?
Can you shovel it maybe like that? Is it like a switching? No, that's strange.
That's so strange.
Yes. I can't unmute.
Is Bob around?
I can't unmute you, Debbie. That's the problem. I would love to do that. But I don't know how. Maybe you try to log in again. Is that an idea? And see, I can use my microphone, or do we have somebody who knows what to do in the crowd here right now? Yeah, I'd love to give you the mic.
Cannot mute and unmute.
Rejoining.
Oh, okay.
Somebody had a tip?
Yeah, but I thought you cannot mute everybody and then unmute everybody.
Okay.
And
but I haven't muted anyone, so that's what I try. I try to unmute, but I can't do it. I don't have. I haven't muted everybody. Maybe try, Debbie, to log in again. See what happens, because it would be beautiful to hear your voice. Yes.
I always smile when I see her.
Yeah.
I always smile when I see Debbie, my co-author and partner.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, let's see if I didn't see her coming in though, so probably that had something to do with it. Everybody, there she is again. Try again, Debbie, to unmute. Well, I would say take a deep breath in, release. And maybe, can you put off the audio screen, like the camera? Can you put that off? Because next to the camera is your mic button. And if you put that off, probably you will find the other button as well. Just try to figure out, and in the meanwhile, I'll invite maybe somebody else if there is a question or a reflection for this moment. Somebody want to reflect on Michael or have a question? Or not yet? Well, you can raise. Eileen, yes, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Michael, for sharing this. But I was wondering, did you, in reflection, in hindsight, if you look to kind of, were there friends around you, or are there kind of signals that people have given you along the way that you maybe at that time ignored? And or I'm just wondering, like, what was the kind of the surrounding? You mentioned the example with Christmas, like, okay, we will only see when he walks in. But was there any feedback given to you directly by others around you, and maybe even also colleagues? I don't know. I was just wondering.
I think probably the answer is no, and that's a function of two things. One is I was only capable, I think, from friendship standpoint, of a pretty superficial level, a relationship, the most superficial level. And as I say, when I say I was 24/7 about work, I mean I was 24/7. And the jobs I have, would easily accommodate that need to be completely and totally immersed. I didn't. It was everything. It was just it was a myopic, obsessive everything. And now I see Debbie's microphone thing is not muted anymore.
Yeah. Hello.
Oh, she can talk.
Yes.
Yay! Okay, now you can introduce Debbie.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful question, Eileen. I think because I see it also with many leaders that you keep on working, you don't even realize, and you don't integrate the feedback as if, because maybe you're not capable of, adapting the real message there. That could be, but there are experts in the room who know better. But I love the question. Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Debbie. Great.
Good morning. I'm so sorry. So sorry for my lateness, long story, and also for being able to get my voice to you.
Yes. See, I hear you to the screen. And thank you. Thank you for being here, Debbie, today.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did have a comment listening to Michael. Yes. It's something that Michael and I have talked a lot about over time, but it just struck me this morning in a new way, thinking about you, Michael, and thinking about all of my clients. And that is the unconscious nature of dissociation, that, a little child doesn't decide to go away, doesn't decide to put the terrible things that they're experiencing into a box and push it to the side. It's something that the brain does when there's overload, when there's more than a little person can tolerate. And the brain, numbs things out. The brain cuts things off. And one of the very first things that, we do when folks come into therapy is we start to make that which has been unconscious over time, certain defensive behaviors, things that the mind does to keep you safe and protected, to start bringing awareness, bringing mindfulness to that. So you then can make what it was previously unconscious, an unconscious act, more conscious. So you can start making choices about stepping into the world in a new way and engaging more consciously with people and with aspects of your life. So I think that you'll soon start to talk about your journey toward health. But I think starting to realize, oh my gosh, this was abuse and this was neglect and this was unbearable, and starting to make a choice about leaning into life and relationships was really where you began your journey toward healing.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful comment here, Debbie, especially that you are not aware of the fact that this is happening or has happened in your brain, and that it needs a lot of work to get conscious around that. I loved you also write about that in the book, and I learned that in my studies around trauma. It's not on purpose. It's not on purpose. You just have no awareness around what's going on. And that's so beautiful, I think, around EMDR. And let's go there now, Michael. When you started your journey, and I know it took a lot, to even take the journey, to even go there. Maybe you can take us along in how you started the journey and what actually, like you said, shared with me, immediately changed when EMDR came into your life.
So it's helpful for your audience to understand that in my case, over the course of about 22 years, I saw about, I guess, 8 different therapists starting in 3rd grade. So that included talk therapists, CBT therapy, intensive short-term dynamic psychotherapy, etc. And I just wasn't getting any kind of sustained or substantive, lasting kind of relief. And I remember being in New York one time with the last therapist I saw, a talk therapist in New York, feeling like this schedule of 50 minutes once a week was just not getting me anywhere. And so my sister is the one that suggested, if you're really serious, why don't you see this doctor, Dr. Jeffrey Magdavita, who's an EMDR therapist, who's 110 miles away from me. And I said, well, Jennifer, he's 2.5 hour drive, but she said, well, if you're serious, what are you waiting for? So I ended up engaging with Dr. Magdavita, who she knew, recommended. And I would go for extended periods because I was coming from New York. So it took a while to get there and a while to get back. But from the very first time I saw him, it was different because I felt like, how can I describe it? It's sort of like describing something behind a pane of glass and breaking the glass and reaching in and actually grabbing and holding the event. And with that, in the grabbing and the holding, came immediate emotional responses that were not from the adult me. They were from pre-verbal 2, 3, 4, the childhood me. And that first meeting, and I think it's, because I was so ready, because normally, the EMDR engagement doesn't start for a while. With bilateral stimulation, it doesn't start for a while. But in my case, I think I was so ready. And the other thing that was remarkable is the immediate level of relief I would feel, because I would drive home 2.5, sometimes 5, if there was an accident on the Merritt Parkway, or if there was snow or rain, or if I had to pull off because I had to sleep. I had plenty of time to think about what happened in his office. And I would have this unbelievable sense of relief. I say this to Debbie all the time. It was like I would take a deep breath and I had like 2 more quarts of lung capacity. Of like I had purged something physical. That's what it felt like. And the first period with Dr. Magdavita had to do with neglect, and I had no idea. I was on this impression that I didn't like my father. My father didn't like me. He didn't love me. He loved my brother and not me. I had figured, if anything, I was all about paternal issues, and my father didn't like me, and he was kind of a bully too. And the neglect part was all about maternal willful neglect, and never had any idea. And the amount of emotion repeatedly, because this went on for about 6 months, of mining and mining for that specific neglect and the longing and the sorrow and the grief. The grief, that was such a big part of it, would come out and it's so different than talk therapy, because as I say, you're not looking at something through a pane of glass. You're actually, the glass is broken and you're dealing with the actual things themselves. And you have, I had so much of somatic experience of at one point, feeling like, my hands would go cold, or I'd get cramping, or, from when I was not being fed, and the whole somatic dimension of EMDR therapy was huge. So it was completely different. And the last thing I'll say is, not one therapist ever mentioned EMDR to me prior to Dr. Magdavita, and no one talked to me about trauma. And I knew nothing about either one of them.
Wow. So everything actually quite immediately changed for you when you started with the EMDR. You could grab it from behind the class. You were coming above the surface again, right? What is it exactly in EMDR that was so different compared to all the other talk therapies? Can you describe that?
I think, well, the literal way it works is I would come in and I would have an experience. Talked about, I was upset about something, or something had happened, and Dr. Magdavita would say, well, what is the earliest experience you could remember where you had that similar feeling, good or bad? And almost inevitably, within a couple of I would say 10, 15 minutes, we would be at a very, very fundamental early childhood event or stage where I was reconnecting with, and I have to say, it was in so many instances, grief, longing, loneliness, feeling abandoned, feeling like I had no one to turn to, and as I say, it's like the difference between someone describing to you what clay feels like, and someone handing you a piece of clay, and you've got it in your hands. There's no comparison.
No.
And in my case, the relief was coming from lancing these boils. I often, early stages of the book, I wanted to have a picture of landfill, and what I was going to refer to as radioactive landfill. And what was a radioactive landfill? It was all the buried trauma. And the way I would think about it is, just the buried trauma. It sits in there, and you don't know it's there, but it's affecting how you see yourself, how you see the world, and the choices that you make unconsciously. So to me, it was very different from the very, very, very beginning. And even though it was 2.5 hours driving up and at least that coming back, and I was going once a week, I would count the days before I would be going back the next time, and I would go for 3 hours at a time.
Wow. Yeah. I see, I have the book here now. What I love so much, maybe you can explain a little bit about that, is this picture, because also you took a lot of effort, Michael, I know that, to find beautiful pictures with every part of the book. I'm not sure you can read the sentence as well. And this is one in the beginnings.
The middle ones, yeah. So
right?
I thought I was, I'm sure I was ADHD, and I also had a traumatized brain, and I couldn't read, and I got terrible grades in school. I had to go to I'd go to reading school after my regular school. It was kind of a mess. And I had a reading tutor on the weekends. Kids were out playing. I was being taken to the reading tutor. So I couldn't read. So I was a visual person.
Right.
And as I started to learn about these concepts about trauma and EMDR, I would come up with these visuals. And this is sort of kind of where the book started. And that one that Barbara just held up was a picture that I got, actually, you'll love to hear this. It came from the head of the Amber Institute in Denmark, who I became friends with, because I would find these images. I had to track them down because I had to get them to release, sign a release. And that little thing inside the amber is a little flower. It was 35 million years old. So it's perfectly preserved in the amber. And that was my way, irrespective of what language you speak, to think about trauma. It's there, perfectly preserved in all its emotional fidelity. And it stays there, perfectly preserved, unless and until you're able to, with the partnership of a great EMDR therapist, to process those things, finally have the charge be removed. You can't ever change the experience, will always be there, but the charge gets finally removed.
Exactly.
And you know, there's 60 of those in the book.
Yeah.
And I spent about almost 4 years curating each one of them. So they're like my children. And it was because I wanted to come up with a language. Debbie always says it's like 2 books in one, because you could just read, we call them billboards. You could just go through and read the 60 billboards and you'll get the book, or you can read the book or do both. But I wanted something, because the book's been translated in several languages. So that image, those images work in any language, doesn't matter.
They do. It's universal. And I think this is such an important image. You see that the trauma is frozen in your brain. It stays there preserved, like you say, for a long time.
Forever.
But it will be charged in your body. You know, the body remembers. And then daily triggers today can activate that frozen memory, so to speak. Because what you said, inevitably, it will resurfaces. It will come above the surface in different shapes and forms, right? And you give us many examples already. I was interested in, while you revisited this frozen part of your life, how was that for you to recognize and acknowledge that what happened in your life and how you had coped all your life was now all coming together?
So it's funny when you think about it, because the way I would think about it now is it takes, believe it or not, it takes a lot of effort to keep that stuff buried. And it's sort of like, if you imagine how much energy it takes to take a big beach ball and keep it underneath the water, you know, that takes a lot of strength to keep it from, you know, popping up above the surface. And you realize that as you, if you're willing to, and you're on the mission to uncover these things, to you know, face the memories, go after the memories, and find out what's there, and it's like peeling back, you know, layers of an onion. And the way it works is, it's not like discrete little treasure hunt of buried trauma. They're sort of interlaced, you know, and you know, they'll lead, one thing will lead to another. It's not like, you know, it's not like a perfect little you know, a little tooth you just pull out. It's a little bit different than that. But the process is one where you go after, and you'll process something, and then something else will come up, and you'll go after that. And over the course of time, if you're lucky and you work with a great therapist, you're able to, you know, chase them down, face them, and as I said earlier, let the charge finally be, you know, it's sort of like the puff of smoke coming out of the Vatican. It goes up and it goes into the atmosphere. It's left for you.
Relief, eh? You can almost feel it. How you talk about it, I can feel it.
And the thing is, you know, you even though they're buried, you go through life and you have these triggers, and like, why did I just go off the rails when Barbara made that comment? Or I smelled that smell and all of a sudden my hands are sweaty. Or like, I got in the elevator and I thought I was going to die. You know, it's like there are triggers all over the place. For me, that stall in the boys' room, absolutely no, there's no way. Going back to a woman's room in college, a dorm room, no way, no, absolutely forget it. I got to run, get out of there. So even though those triggers are around, you got to work with someone to find out where they lead, to be actual, you know, to process them. and finally get that charge released.
Exactly. And the release, that is the beautiful thing, I suppose, that happens with EMDR, the awareness and the release. So you don't have to push that ball like you described it, but now you can start creating your life. Well, like you woke up from the clouds. That's what you said. You came out of the clouds, right?
Yeah. Or what I like to say is, like, when you're living with your head underwater, you can't really see clear. When your head's above water, you can see clearly. Like, why am I married to that person? What am I doing in this? I don't like this job. Why am I in this job? Why am I living here? I don't want to live here. Because you're above, your head's above water. But the other thing I wanted to tell your audience was, in my case, I had another bunch of events kind of conspire, and it was kind of one sort of combined trigger. And I made a switch from Dr. Magnavita to another incredible therapist that, thank God for Debbie, recommended to me. And she's so incredibly great, excellent. And also for me, it helps, I think, that she's a woman. And I realized that there was another layer, as I said earlier, there was another layer that I had to go and deal with. It was ironically as bad, if not worse, than the worst experiences I had, with Dr. Magnavita. So what is my point? My point is, it's a process. It's not a one and done proposition, because in my case, the most protected memories, or state of mind, there's a part of me that still needed healing. The fight or flight thing had still been compartmentalized and pushed underground. So I want everyone to know that it is a process. In my case, I want to just stick with it, with the safety of an incredible EMDR therapist to be there with me, always keeping, one foot in the present and one foot with the traumatic experience, so you feel safe, and just keep going until that wonderful time you feel like, what, I don't need to come here anymore.
Yeah.
God, I think I'd rather go on vacation. I think I'd rather go see a movie. I don't really like, already right now, the idea of getting in a car and driving 2.5 hours and spending 3 hours talking to Magnavita and driving back for 5 hours. Oh my, that's the last thing I'd want to do now. But at the time, I was so desperate.
Yeah. And that's beautiful what you say. It is, in a way, ongoing work. Because of the work you did with Dr. Magnavita, you even could dive deeper in where you needed to go, right? Getting more release in your life right now. And I'd love for you to share, because of that, what happened in your relationship with your brother.
Oh, okay. Well, that was, people ask me, let's say, well, what was, like my younger sister's husband's kind of a skeptic. He's a forensic psychologist. He's kind of a skeptic for EMDR. And they'll say, like, what did you really get out of it? And I'll give you this is just one example, and there are many. My brother was such a brutal bully, and my two sisters were definitely traumatized by observing him beat me up and trying to pull him off of me, and I mean, really, really bad for them too. And we had no relationship our whole life. In fact, when my mother died, I was debating whether to go to the service because I didn't want to see my brother. This is like 65 years old. And I remember going, and I remember leaving the airport in Denver. And by the time I got to where my mother lived, 2.5 hours, my GI was so dysregulated. I had diarrhea. I had to sit in the last row of the service because I was running back and forth to the men's room. And it was terrible. So when the book was about to come out, Dr. Magnavita said, you cannot surprise your brother. You have to tell him. So I reached out to him. We had no relationship for our whole lives, none. And I would tell my sisters, I never want anything to do with him. I never want to talk to him. Never. He reached back to me and he said, you could say whatever you want in this book about me, as long as there's a chance that maybe finally we could have a relationship. And he asked me, he said, could Debbie recommend an EMDR therapist for me? Which she did. one of her most trusted colleagues. He went on a 2-year EMDR journey. Since that happened, we have had a Zoom call every single Friday for 2 years. We've taken 2 vacations together, just the 2 of us. And I will tell you, we have had so many, one revelation after the other. That happened? Oh my God. She did that. Oh my God. And I will tell you, and it may sound bizarre, the most intimate relationship I have right now in my life, I hope it doesn't last forever, I want to have more, is with my brother. And already I don't know what I'd do without him. And, you know, the weird thing is the person that I grew up with, that person does not exist anymore. My brother that I have a relationship with now is a completely different person, vulnerable, uncertain. I've had calls with him when he'd be in tears, crying with me on a Zoom call, you know, and it's just been, and he's, you know, he's gone through an incredibly difficult time because a lot of the same things I had to deal with. You know, Gabor Mate says that no child has the same relationship with the parent because, you know, it's always different. And then as each child is born, the parents are in different states of financial or relationship realities. So it's always different for every child. But I will tell you, if I think of anything as a miracle in my life, it's the fact that I have a relationship with my brother, which I've never had my whole life and would never have had without this.
Yeah. That's amazing, Michael, really. And now you could see each other, right? That's what happened. And you could
actually, Barbara, I'm glad you said that, because Debbie said this to me, and also the current therapist I have, her name is Heather, that my parents, they never saw me ever. I don't know. I don't know what, they were so narcissistic. They was almost, they couldn't see anything. I was never seen by my parents ever. And, you know, that on top of the no attachment deals, you know, my brother sees me. My sisters now see me. My friends see me. You know,
Yeah.
Debbie sees me.
And you see you.
It's a totally different thing.
And you shared a little bit about your mother in our last call. You said most likely she wasn't seen as well, right? So
no,
you know,
I think she was a daughter of an alcoholic. She was a theater major. What does that say? And I'm convinced that she probably was a sexual abuse victim herself. So, you know, that's one half. My father was, you know, grew up in a family. He had one sibling. He had no relationship with his father or his mother. They were brought out for viewings, and, you know, he grew up alone. He went to Korea. I think he came back with PTSD. You know, so they were both so damaged.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I want to ask you, because this is an important part. I know it's so important that you bring your work, your story, the book to other people, and well, we share an urgency there, right? In bringing this work also to leaders, because I noticed that many health professionals communicate together, and you share your story on many podias, but not often to leaders, right? And
yeah, and actually, yeah, and Barbara, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wanted to very specifically address that, because I was concerned, having been on this trajectory for decades of compulsive achievement, that this work might sort of like, you know, Samson, you know, if you cut my hair, I've got no power. The irony is, I am so much more connected to my real talents. I am so much more relaxed about my work. I am so much more confident in my own skin about what I'm capable of, what I like doing. And it was the opposite of what I was afraid of. So if leaders in your audience are thinking, well, I don't know, this sounds like maybe you're gonna mess with the formula that's maybe successful. In my case, it was just the opposite. And I now am amazed at like, I just did a conference with a client for a week in Nashville. I had 9 keynote speakers and the CEO. And the feedback was so universally positive, and I saw them give their keynote speeches, and they're all like, oh my God, they're all so good. And all I'm doing is what I love to do, what I'm capable of doing, what I've trained myself to do. And if anything, it's removed that second guessing, that uncertainty, that maybe I'm a fraud, maybe I'll do something wrong and I'll be discovered. All that's all gone. Now I just have the pleasure of doing what I love doing, communication coaching and branding. I just did a branding workshop for a church. I've never done a church before. And the priest came up to me after and said, Michael, this was so incredible. This exceeded every expectation I had. I was so nervous at the beginning. And I'm just doing what I love to do.
That's it.
So if anything, it'll remove all that plaque you may have as a leader that you have to kind of try to manage while you're trying to focus on what you're good at. So you could just enjoy what you're good at.
Yeah. Yeah. And also on the journey, that's because I can see it in your energy. It's like what Deborah told to me, adaptive resolution, right? Is the word that Francis Shapiro used. That is something you will experience. So you do it straight from the heart, and you help leaders do that as well, right? But yet at the same time, you're not harming anyone. There are no ruptures because of your inhibitions, most likely. There are no ruptures. You are repairing yourself and others. And that's why I think it's so important. And I'm very grateful that, because it's unique, right, that you share this story as you, as a leader, as you, as Michael, as the brother, as the son, but also as the one who experienced EMDR, to be so open and so vulnerable with the people here around you today, your audience, actually. So that's amazing. And thank you so much for inspiring the people here, because we need that more, right? Instead of suppressing and harming, because at the end of the day, we all come home to families or to children or to our community. So it's very important to heal within and to build from the inside out. Again, I'd like to open the space to the audience to maybe ask some questions to you, or reflect, or add something. And we have about 10 minutes left for that. And I'd like to end our circle, what I learned with Deborah in our previous circle, maybe to ask you for a word or a comment or a sentence. You can do it also in the chat to close our conversation together. But feel free now within the 10 minutes to raise your hand or to ask a question. And yeah, let's see what happens. I'll open it up. Does anybody want to reflect?
Argue, disagree.
I can see Karina, I think, yes.
Yeah, hi, Michael. I'm Karina. I'm here in Holland. I was sitting yesterday with a friend. We were talking about EMDR very coincidentally. And what I'd like to understand is, and I said, well, you should try EMDR. And she goes, well, I've understood that EMDR is you have a certain trauma. You recognize the trauma, like I'm scared of driving, or I've been through this. And then you go and you have that dealt with. She goes, but I'm a people pleaser. I want to get rid of my people pleasiness, but I don't know where it ever started. So how can I go and do EMDR, because there is no time location for this, how do you say, behavior?
I have one answer, Debbie.
Definitely.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Happy to jump in. Most people show up at the therapist's door not with a clear sense of, I want to work on that memory. I want to work on that memory. Most people turn up and say, I have this lifelong pattern, or I'm having difficulty in my relationships, or I don't like myself. And they don't have a sense of where it comes from. Every now and then someone can point, but most of the time people just know that they're suffering in the present. And it's really the responsibility of a trained EMDR therapist to start to explore back, to really start to float back and explore the story, the history of that pattern, that belief, that symptom. And we do it sometimes through the body, like, when's the last time you engaged in people pleasing? right? Bring up an image of last week when you were engaged in trying to make someone happy. What does that feel like in your body? What are the words that go with it? You know, I must be loved, or I'm nobody, I can't let anybody know that. Whatever it is that connects to that recent experience in terms of thoughts, feelings, sensations, we use that to track back to earlier experiences. When's the first time or the earliest time you remember experiencing anything like that? And over the course of an exploration, we float back until we can identify memories that have some degree of charge to them. And that becomes our target. And it's a process. It's a process that we revisit again and again as the individual gets greater and greater clarity about what's at the core of their distress. We kind of identify the core beliefs, the core feelings, and then we go searching through the body, through affect, to try to find targets that are relevant.
Makes sense. All right. Thank you.
I love that question, Karina, because I can also understand that people don't start the process because they don't know where to begin. So beautiful answer, Deborah, as well, that it is a journey, right? And you go tracking and tracking until you find the target memory, the frozen one, I suppose, that is charged in your body and in your behaviors today. I understand it correctly. Wonderful question. Thank you, Karina. Anyone else? Or maybe a reflection. There is a hand, I think. Elena? Yes.
Yeah, I actually have a question.
Marija, yes.
Or more, yeah, hi Michael, hi everyone. I'm from Colorado. I'm from Holland, but I'm calling you from Colorado, so resonated there a little bit with you, Michael. Just listening to you, your journey and what you went through, and then the healing journey. My question is this: so on your healing journey, even though you were guided by a therapist, do you feel like, looking back now, like by bringing awareness to the pain, you're actually holding yourself as a child, being older now? You know what I mean? And healing yourself, looking at yourself, and all the longings that maybe you had from, that you missed with your mom and your dad and your brother. Now you're giving that to yourself. Can I conclude that, or is that something that you experience that way?
I'm going to see you and raise you one. So
what?
I'm going to see you like in a poker game. I'm going to see you and I'm going to raise you one. Meaning yes and yes. So I've had situations where and I think I read in the book where I never really understood this concept of, younger parts of yourself and the adult part of yourself. And so in yoga, when I finally got it, what it meant in the final corpse pose, Shavasana, I would sit there, I would imagine all the younger, damaged, hurt, longing, grieving parts of me coming up to me one by one, kind of crawling out, from there where they're hiding, and sitting in my lap, sitting on my other knee, letting me hold them, various ages. So I'm really, at one point, my arms are around all of them. And also I've had situations with Heather where traumatic situations where I'm in a really bad situation at a young age. And I tell her, I said, I can't. She said, what would you say to her? I said, it's not just what I would say. I would have to go in and pick him up, pick the younger me up and hold me and hold me and let, with both my arms and let me know that I'm there and you're safe and this isn't going to happen anymore. And I'm taking you out of this situation. So it's absolutely, I think, fundamental, this part where it needs to be me addressing, protecting, reassuring, being there for the younger versions of me. I think it's fundamental to the process. And it took me a while to understand what that was all about. And then when I finally did, it's just, I keep this picture on my desk all the time. This is me trying to muster a smile when I know I was miserable. This is like first grade. I never am without this picture right in front of me, because, you know, that's who I am, how do I say it? No one else was there for that person, but I'm going to be.
Yeah. And it also seems very empowering that you're not depending on anyone else for your own healing. Like your mom doesn't have to say sorry, or your dad doesn't have to
'Cause they're not-
apologize. Like you're actually through this process, like giving it all to yourself. And I think that's very empowering to hear. So
Yeah.
I'm going to just give that back to you.
Thank you, Mariah. That is beautiful
Mm.
that you said that you not have to rely. And that's a beautiful switch. And like you said, Michael, my mother didn't see me, but I see me now, right? And you can hold yourself. Wonderful that you have that picture there. And great for pointing it out, Mariah. Very nice, beautiful. Due to time, I'm sure we can talk a lot more, but the time is almost up. So I'd like to ask if you're willing maybe to leave a word or a sentence in the chat for Michael to give your reflection or to respond. And you can also leave your contact details there if you want to connect with somebody from the crowd here. Or is there somebody who just wants to say something to close our circle here to Michael? You can also show a little emotion.
You're going to hurt my feelings if you don't tell me something.
Look at those hearts.
I would certainly like to say thank you so much for being so open. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Dorte.
yeah, beautiful.
What an interesting name you have.
Thank you. It's a Danish name. It means the gift of God.
Oh,
Oh, wow.
wow. Well, I'll tell you, it's such an honor, and this is by way of Barbara, and I'm just so glad Debbie's here, you know, because we did this book to decode trauma for the world and introduce them to EMDR therapy, which Debbie always says in her 30 plus years as a clinician is the most effective and efficient way to deal and to treat trauma. And it's, you know, it's not about who you are, it's about what happened to you. You know, it's just it's been a life-saving thing for me, and the more people that know about it, the better. So that's why we created the book in the first place.
Yeah. And thank you for doing that work, both Michael and Deborah together. You know, you make, I think by sharing this as well, you make a lot of people feeling worth it also with your story. And I'm sure it not only stays from in the circle, but the ripple effect outside, maybe people sharing, you know, with your partners or your colleagues or your friends after this circle will bring that worth even further than it did. So thank you so much, Michael, for guiding us today and being so open. That's a real blessing. I'm very grateful. And thank you all for being here and for your attention. And hopefully, well, we see you in the next circle. Thank you all.
Thank you.
See
Thank
ya.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.